All right, so we just got details on the first season for Diablo IV, the season of the Malignant. And I felt like there's a good opportunity to give you guys my thoughts on it as a casual player. And then also on top of that, just try to look at things from a different perspective, because I've seen a lot of people being pretty negative about it, and I completely understand where they're coming from, but I also want to come at it from a different perspective as well. I'm going to save you guys some time. I'm going to list a few of the things that they brought up in the developer update, but I'm also going to assume that you've probably read or watched most of this on your own, so I'll keep that brief. Just so you guys know, the patch does go live on July 20th. All right, we're just going to touch on a few key points here just so we can get the ball rolling and get onto some of my thoughts. A few of the things that they're still currently working on right now: increasing our inventory space, giving us the ability to teleport directly into dungeons, making sure unique items drop from more things in the games. This is one of the problems that they had with some of the Uber uniques, where they were only dropping from level 85 and up monsters. They're also going to give them the opportunity to drop from certain chests, hell tides, things like that. All right, now on to the seasonal update. The first season is called Season of the Malignant, and in Season of the Malignant, we will come across malignant creatures, which are elite enemies that will die and have an on-death effect to drop a malignant heart. We touch that malignant heart, it summons a stronger version of that elite, as well as another monster pack along with it. We kill them, and then we get a malignant heart that we're able to use and socket into our gear that gives us basically a new set of legendary aspects. It might be a little bit stronger than that, but it's going to give us a little bit more build variety and be able to do some pretty cool things. So there are 32 Malignant Hearts. Each of them have a color-specific slot. However, there are some of them, I think it's Wrathful, that don't have any color associated to them, so you can put them in any socket that you want. These go in your neck and your rings. Each one of these obviously has a legendary aspect associated to them, or a legendary-like aspect associated to them. So we're going to see how powerful this stuff gets once we actually get our hands on it. This season does allow us to be able to target farm different hearts if we're looking for a very specific heart, and we can do that by salvaging some of the hearts that we found along the way that may or may not be ones we want to use. This season also is going to include some new bosses and new events, and there are going to be 6 new uniques and 7 legendary aspects that will be added to both the seasonal and eternal realm. So now onto my overall thoughts about the developer update. And to be honest with you, I left pretty happy. I know there's quite a lot of people that are pretty upset about a lot of different things, and I can completely understand why they are, but I'm going to give you my reasons as to why I'm a little bit optimistic about the future of the game. One of the first things they brought up is something that I have been heralding for quite a while now, which is it takes time to fix certain things. And we can sit around and we can talk about how did they not notice this? But you also have to keep in mind that they had players that had played Diablo for thousands of hours that were testing the game for the last year as well. Other people doing closed beta tests. They had World of Warcraft players that were playing, or World of Warcraft developers that were playing it, people from Activision Blizzard that were playing it. However, like, how long were those people playing it? Did they get to play it for a weekend? Did they get to play it for a month? That all kind of depends. And what it seems like, to me at least, for some of the issues that we're running into, inventory space and stuff like that, these are things. It's mostly because they just didn't let people test it for as long as you would need to actually see a lot of these issues come up. That's why usually we see a lot of these big updates and a lot of these big changes when some of these live service games are released, because, well, you just don't know what people are going to do with it. You don't know how the players are going to interact with the game once they've played it for a month or a year or whatever, and more things are going to come to light and more things are going to get changed. And they brought up specifically that they are very open to change and they want this to be the best version of Diablo IV it can possibly be. However, they want us to keep in mind that just because we can think of something that needs to get fixed, it doesn't mean it can get fixed immediately. When they find something and they go, oh, yes, this is an issue, we need to fix this, they talk to the engineers. The engineers say, well, I can give you 2 options. I can give you the quick fix, which is kind of, the jank fix with the duct tape, or I can take longer and I can fix it later and it'll be, something that feels more intuitive with the game. Again, a really good example of this is like teleporting to nightmare dungeons, where it would be nice if it teleported us into the nightmare dungeon. However, that's not what they could pull off immediately because that wasn't how the game was designed in the first place. So then the question becomes, is this enough content to keep players happy? And to be honest with you, I think it just depends on the player. If you're coming from Path of Exile, where your leagues are much longer, have a heck of a lot more content, more items, bosses, things like that, chances are probably not. For somebody coming from Diablo 3 or some other game, yeah, it might be enough for you. For me, it feels a little light. I'll be honest with you. It definitely feels a little light, but it also at the same time is something well within expectations for Diablo 4 in its first season, so I'm not really going to throw them too much flack over it, right? They did mention bosses, and the boss part I actually really enjoyed because I'm like, well, I'm hoping that's going to be capstone bosses, because giving those incremental bosses for us to fight at like every 10 levels or so, that is really going to be able to change up the game and give us something to look forward to. We need something like that between that 70 to 100 gap, because that's where things get really bland. Now, I actually reached out to Joe Pipiora on Twitter, and I asked him directly about this, saying, do you guys plan on making story bosses a part of the endgame loop, or even the capstone dungeons, rather than just being throwaway content? Bossing/boss rushing would be a great way to break up the endgame a bit. Joe Pipiora answered, saying, launch is just the beginning. I believe he's quoting himself on this. And now this is the thing to kind of keep in mind, right? Is that just because this is a seasonal update doesn't mean there aren't going to be other changes that are going to happen within the game outside of that seasonal update as well. They've kind of already proven that with the other updates they've made so far, whether that's been balance changes or whatever else. They're going to add more to the game. And the more that players keep asking for certain things, the more things that they're going to see and they're going to experience themselves when they play the game as well. And that's when we're going to see more changes. I'm hoping to see more bosses. I'm hoping to see other ways to break up the monotony of the end game a little bit. But I feel like for the most part, the game's been out for a month. We just kind of have to be patient about it. It is what it is. If it does come out 4 or 5 months from now, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. I could sit here and I could be upset about it. I could be on Reddit screaming my head off just the same as anybody else. Or I could just say, it is what it is. I'll come back and play the game in a few more months when the game gets a little bit better and there's more things to do, just like I do with just about every other game to begin with anyway. I don't really sit around and play one single game all the time. That's the only thing that I'm looking to invest my time in. I understand there's people that want to do that. I get it. But, you know, there's only so much that people can provide. And did they have some oversight? Yeah, of course they had some oversight. There's always going to be oversight during any project, regardless of whatever industry it's going to be in. There's going to be things that you just didn't think about. There wasn't that one guy in the room that said, hey, you know, maybe we need this, or hey, maybe we need that. Just kind of is what it is. I mean, we can be mad about it, but that doesn't help us, nor does it really help them. So I just don't really see any point in it. Outside of that, I mean, I'm decently impressed with how they've been handling the game so far. They've been really transparent with their communication, and they've changed a lot of the things that the players have been asking for. Yeah, some things are taking a little bit longer, but that's because they actually have to be engineered into the game to actually take place in the, you know, and actually be in there in the first place. So I'm chilling, man. I'm just being patient. Outside of that, the actual seasonal mechanic itself, I don't like how it kind of interrupts gameplay. I'm not really too big of a fan of that, especially with like on-death mechanics and stuff like that being in the game. I don't know why those have to be in games. I wish they could be a little bit more creative. ARPGs in general, by the way, this isn't just a Diablo problem. This is just ARPGs in general. They really always fall on like CC and on-death mechanics and stuff like that, but there has to be some other way to be creative. But yeah, outside of that, I think it's fine. There's other ways they probably could have gone about doing this, but outside of that, I'm pretty happy with it. I would have liked it better if they used shrines or something like that in dungeons or in out in the open world, and that's how we got these keys instead. You know, you tap something, it starts an event, you have to kill all these malignant monsters, and then you get the heart. But maybe logistically, that just didn't make a lot of sense to them. Now, there's something else that I saw people kind of hang on to, and not for necessarily the right reasons, and I feel like it's mostly because they held on to the words rather than the entire message. It's like when you read the first line of something rather than the entire sentence. And what they had brought up was the fact that whether or not these mechanics would be making their way over to the Eternal Realm after the season had finished, right? And they had said that no, these mechanics would be thrown away and there'd be something new for the next season, mostly because they didn't want the game to become too dense. Specifically because they don't want the game to become Path of Exile. And they didn't say those words, but I understand where they're coming from by saying that. While some people will say, well, that's why Path of Exile is great. Well, it's also why Path of Exile is really scary for new players to get into playing, because there's just so much content. There's so many different things. There's so many different mechanics, and it's really hard for a new player to be able to keep up with. So you have to be kind of responsible about what you keep and what you throw away. And I think that's what they ended up bringing up in that conversation to begin with, because at the end of it, they said if there is something that's exceedingly good that the players do like, they will keep that mechanic. They will look into ways that they can implement that into the game. However, the last thing that they want to do is continuously bombard us with overpowered mechanics, and the game gets far too difficult to balance in the future. That I can understand. If you try to put that into perspective, take a minute to think about it. If they add these Malignant gems this season, and then they add some other really powerful mechanic in the next season, and then also the season after that, not only are you balancing gear and equipment, not only are you balancing the classes themselves, not only are you balancing the legendary aspects, now you're balancing those gems, the other mechanics, whatever else you're adding into the game, and it just becomes far too difficult to be able to keep track of. You could say, hey, that's their responsibility, that's what they need to do, but I mean, I don't know, man, just try to be realistic about it. That's really all I can say. So that's it. That's all I got. The season seems a little bit on the light side, but outside of that, I think it's just fine. It's their first season. I'm pretty optimistic about how the game's going to look in the future. And the thing is, guys, there's tons of other games to play at the same time. We don't need to dedicate all of our time to one single game. I already got my money out of the game to begin with anyway, so anything after that's going to be a cherry on top. I've already enjoyed playing Diablo IV. I've had a lot of fun playing it. I've had a lot of fun playing it with friends, which if you haven't done that at all yet, do it, because it just adds a whole other dimension to the game that makes it a heck of a lot more fun. Changes things up quite a lot. I'm excited to see what they do with the game in the future, but there's tons of other stuff to play at the same time. I played Final Fantasy XVI. The game's absolutely fantastic. Baldur's Gate 3 is on the way. Starfield's on the way. I've been playing that Halls of Torment. I was watching Asmongold play it. Dude, it's so good. So good. I'm actually probably going to stream some of that after I'm done with this video. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, please subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment. Let me know what you guys thought about the Season 1 update. Outside of that, stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe, my friends. I'll see you next time. Peace.